Happy Taco Thursday, everybody. It's your boy Aaron B. And it's Cowboys versus Eagles preview week. So, it's NFC East rivals. But we got a great show for y'all. But before we get into it, we got to show love to our sponsors, and that is What a Clean Solution. Need to get your carpets clean, couches, tile, grout, moving in or moving out. Need to get the place to look brand new. Call What a Clean Solution, a family-owned mobile cleaning service that can get anything clean from a small carpet to even making your car or truck look brand new. Give them a call at 210-790-1410. Use promo code TNT for 5% off your total cleaning. That's promo code TNT. And text them or call them at 210-790-1410 for 5% off. So I'm going to give the floor to Shane to introduce our guests.
I have been trying to get this man onto the show before, but it's always a matter of like getting the right guest for the right situation. And I'm happy to have someone here who I can say is a consummate professional, and I'm someone I'm happy to see who's grown in the sports industry. He covers betting, college sports, as well as the NFL for the Philadelphia Inquirer. It's the real Devin Jackson. Devin, happy to have you on, my guy.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Shane and Aaron. I appreciate the invite. And like I was telling you off the air, looking forward to talking about this Eagles and Cowboys preview for the game. Big NFC East showdown, two of the better teams in the NFC, and could go a long way in determining, who has the number one seed in the NFC at the end of the season. So looking forward to previewing this and ready to talk some more ball.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Before we get into like the Cowboys talk, I just want to do a quick so we had the trade deadline happen. So was there like a surprise trade that y'all thought was that surprised y'all? And I know there was some trades that kind of you seen the Montez Sweat one coming and the Chase Young one, but was there like a trade like okay, I didn't see that happening?
I would say probably the Chase Young trade, honestly, not necessarily in terms of him getting traded, but the destination and what it took for the 49ers to give up to get him. Look, the 49ers are always active, on these trade deadlines, and we got Christian McCaffrey last year, with a third and fifth round pick. No, it was like I forget the exact haul, but it
It
was a
was like a
couple of day two
second, a
pick.
third, and a fifth, right? It was a
Yeah,
bevy of picks, and then
yeah.
they sent the six with McCaffrey.
Right. So you seeing that deal and seeing what it took to get him. And obviously Chase Young has dealt with injuries and just hasn't been on the field enough. But he was having a really good season of a resurgence for the Commanders, and it just felt like they could have got more back for him. Maybe they just wanted to kind of move on and I guess signal a rebuild, but it was just a surprising move for a team that you know they've been up and down, but certainly seems like they were heading the right direction. Played the Eagles tough twice, and got some surprising wins, but it just I guess it just organizationally wise, like it just didn't make a lot of sense. I guess to send both of them off at the trade deadline. Sure, you could let maybe one of them walk in free agency, but to see both of them go, especially with Chase Young over to the 49ers, maybe you thought he goes to the AFC team, but sending him to another NFC team was just a head scratcher for me.
Yeah. Oh, you gonna say something, Shane?
Well, no, I was thinking like in terms of like you said, surprise trades. The reality is none of these trades that landed really surprised me. All that surprised me was the players that didn't get traded. I thought for sure uh, King Henry was going to be out of Tennessee. I thought after that game, Devontae Adams was going to say trade me today. I thought a lot of things were going to happen that didn't. All the trades that happened, Chase Young, Montez Sweat, Razul Douglas, all those trades made sense because of one, the fact that they came from the teams that really are sellers, and two, that they moved to teams who had an obvious need. And I guess the Bears trade was the one that surprised me because I'm surprised the Bears were in the talent acquisition phase. Also for the fact that they gave not that they gave up a second, but the implication for this trade was that maybe they would try and sign him long term. When the Bears probably could have kept that pick and then gone after him in free agency anyway. I think the Bears are scheduled to have like the fourth or fifth most cap space to spend on in free agency next year. So I didn't think needing to send a second over to Washington was necessary. But if his intention is to stay there, then I think it's actually a great pickup because the last 4 years, Montez Sweat, injuries aside, has been the better player between him and Chase Young. Chase Young obviously would have the higher upside. Um, yeah, the Chase Young trade made a lot of sense just because even though everyone talks about how dominant Nick Bosa is, the reality is that the 49ers defensive line actually has not been as dominant as it has in the past. It's really been like their overall front seven and the schematics in terms of the middle of the field. And anyone who watched that Niners Cowboys game saw the only plays the Cowboys were able to get were outside the tackles. Anything in between the middle of the field was pretty much taken away because they're so good with the safeties and that third level. The cornerbacks has been the. I'm surprised they didn't trade for a cornerback. I do know they were looking at Adoree Jackson in New York. I do know they were looking at Jalen Johnson in Chicago, just like the Cowboys reportedly were, but no one wanted to send him a second. So really the surprise for me was mostly just like who didn't get moved. All the trades that happened, I mean, I think made sense.
I think one trade that just threw me off a little bit was the Ezra Cleveland trade to the Jags, just for the haul that it was only a 6th round. Because I think Ezra Cleveland is actually a solid offensive lineman. And when you think of teams that need offensive linemen, you usually want to give a little bit more to like, okay, we'll trade, but we at least want a third, but a sixth. That kind of threw me off for why'd y'all just give him why was it just a 6? Why don't you kind of reach for a fourth? Because he's actually a solid offensive lineman. He's just not like some no name depth piece or nothing like that. He
And
could
on
be a
top of
target.
and on top of that is a starting offensive lineman usually get traded in the off season, not in the middle of the year. That's usually an off season move. You're right. Ezra Cleveland was probably one of the more underrated starting guards in the NFL, despite all the dysfunction on the Vikings offensive line. And the Jags obviously needed that because they're gonna be a team that's gonna compete in the AFC. Um, I guess with the injury to Kirk Cousins, it made sense to move pieces or early. But if the 6th round is all it took, I wonder how many suitors actually called about him. Was it made notice that he was even available? So I guess I love the trade for Jacksonville. I just the timing of it did kind of throw me off.
Yeah, because when you look at those type of offense, it must have they just must have just tried it out and it just happens. They're like, okay, let's take a 6. Because if you're there's like a whole bunch of teams kind of saying we're interested Ezra Cleveland, you think they'd probably up the price to maybe like a fourth or a third, but they got him for a 6. But moving on to our next thing is we got to get into Cowboys versus Eagle talk. What we're here for. So my question for you, Devin, is how'd you become an Eagles fan? I know you're from the area, but was there like that one Eagle player like, okay, this will be my team?
Strangely enough, I just objectively cover the Eagles. It just came about because I'm working at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and part of the job duties is to keep up with them and know as much as I can about them, and obviously watch their games and see kind of the trends and whatnot. Because the main thing I do is cover the NFL draft for the Inquirer, so. Uh, Getting that insight, knowing where they might go in the draft and where the holes in their teams might be was kind of my main focus. I grew up a Saints fan, but
Hmm.
since I got into sports journalism, just becoming a little bit more objective and seeing things for what they are, and not try to have you know kind of the fan shades on when looking at teams. I think it is certainly helped, but yeah, been watching the Eagles most of my life, obviously, since they're NFC, so familiar with their history and some of the things they've done over the years, and obviously the Dallas and Philly, history and rivalry. But for the most part, I try to stay pretty objective. But since we're talking about favorite players on the team, I do really like Josh Sweat. Got to talk to him after the Bears Eagles game last year, and his energy and insight and what he's doing and how he's doing it, and really he's just an underrated player on the team. Everyone talks about
Hmm.
Hassan Reddick and Fletcher Cox, Jalen Carter, but he's really been their best edge defender this year, and quietly again having another really big season and for a big payday.
Yeah, he's kind of like y'all's Dorrance Armstrong, because while the focus is primarily on y'all's star edge rusher, Hassan Reddick, just like the focus is on with us is Micah Parsons. You have this other guy who's a pure defensive lineman who's making a lot of plays. Come off the edges against the pass, and for us that's been well, at least this season it was Dorrance Armstrong. He's been a 5 to 8 sack kind of guy the last 3 seasons, and I just gotta say, because you talked about your draft content, Aaron, Devin is one of my favorite draft analysts on here, and Devin can attest this, along with Ian Cummins and Damian Parsons, the guys that Devin knows also. His stuff going back to blue chip, he's very analytical, and and what I like about Devin is he likes to cover those small school guys first because that's where you find those diamonds. The small school guys are always where you find like those little hidden gems, and they'll always seem to make this like huge impact. And some people call it out of nowhere, but if you do your homework, then you know they've been doing this. They just went to a school that maybe you never watched.
Yeah, absolutely. One of those players was Deron Bland, and I know he's become a big
Yeah.
player
Yeah,
for the
I was about to
Cowboys,
ask you about
and
that.
I really, really liked his take coming out, and thought he was going to be a future starter. And I didn't expect him to burst on the scene quite like this, but he's someone that I'm really looking forward to watching closely
Hmm.
in this matchup, and obviously he's going to be a big key trying to slow down the Eagles receivers.
When I saw his tape from Fresno State, because like I don't have all 22 myself. I have to get it from somebody else who's I won't put their name out there because I don't get anybody in trouble. But when I get a hold of that stuff, I thought like, okay, he's definitely a nickel guy, but I was like, he might have upside as a safety because he plays pretty good in space, and he obviously does still in the NFL. But like the versatility of him going inside to outside, I still think he's a better nickel cornerback in my opinion. But he's been able to still be a shutdown guy on the outside. You're right, he's been one of those diamonds that we talk about. Another one who's become our starting will linebacker because of injury was a couple years
Marquise
ago
Bell.
that Marquise Bell, yeah, exactly, the top rated HBCU product coming out of Florida A&M. He was a guy that I thought they were going to try and target in the seventh but I don't think they had any seventh round picks at the time. They had to trade back in to get him. No one was going to take him. They were lucky enough to get him as an undrafted free agent, and he's become, I think, our third. Aaron, you might correct me on this. He's either our third or fourth highest rated defensive player so far this season. I know he's in that mix,
Yeah,
but
he's third. Yeah, third.
he's third. Yeah, he's third.
Yeah.
He's gone from a rotational safety linebacker hybrid similar to Jaron Curse to almost purely at linebacker, mostly because of injury, but he's not really missed a beat. And pairing him with Damone Clark, who had to take over at Mike after Leighton Vander Esch injury, has been actually a huge revelation because even though I don't think the run defense has like been the same without Leighton, it's still solid enough, but there's definitely more speed out there.
Yeah, Marquise Bell has been incredible in his short NFL career, and I've said it. Jordan Reed has said it over at ESPN. There's no way he shouldn't have been drafted. On draft
I
night.
thought he was gonna be a fifth round guy at the earliest or something like that.
Yeah, I had a fourth round grade on him because I thought he was, rotational guy early in his career, special teams core, could eventually start, and I thought he was going to stick a little bit more at safety, but his instincts and ability to work in space just makes sense. Playing at the linebacker position, but yeah, he's been great. Really, the Cowboys have done a great job, especially in those later rounds, day three guys, UDFA guys, being able to find them, develop them, and get them on the field and be contributors. It's a big reason why they'll be able to pay Micah Parsons here in a year or two to make a contract extension. Just being able to find those draft gems and continue to add to it. And I know, along the offensive line, they might have to be doing some patchwork there, especially at tackle. But guys that they drafted as well in the recent years are once again paying big dividends for their depth pieces at the very least.
It's like when you see small school guys, it's still that stigma that goes on even with the scouts. But like when, like guys like yourself, you do the research and like, okay, these guys can play. But do you think that small school stigma is still there to this day, even though we're getting more, you get to see more film on guys that are like from the HBCUs or the mid-major schools like at the MAC or the Mountain West? You see little gems right there. Do you think that is going to continue to be there, or you think it's getting better? Where okay, these guys can still play at the same level as like a guy in the SEC?
I think it just kind of comes down, and it's not really fair to them, but it comes down to those environments that they're playing at a similar level. So getting to the Senior Bowl, getting to the Shrine Bowl, even the NFLPA Bowl when it was still going on, is such a huge part of the process. And they're trying to get, like the HBCU, combine as a part of the process and invite him to the NFL combine. So really, it kind of comes down to one. A lot of these guys are just automatically going to be picked third round or later, just because of the competition level and where they played at. But two, sometimes it's better to go undrafted than versus being drafted because then you kind of are in control of maybe a connection you made with a coach or
It's like recruiting.
yeah, exactly. A connection you made with a scout. So it makes it a little bit better for some players to be able to choose their own route versus having to be thrust in the area. Maybe they pick you just to make the pick, to kind of satisfy the pick. But if you have 4 or 5 guys already ahead of you and already seeing, big time playing time ahead of you coming in, it puts you at a disadvantage, but either way, just getting into NFL camp, really is the most important part because you land on a practice squad somewhere, whether it be the team that drafts you or brings you in or some other team will see it. So, I think it's starting to go away in terms of being able to acquire guys and knowing that these guys can play at this level. But I still think they're still underdrafted. Essentially, it
I
just is
agree.
what it is, and for them, you just hope you find the best spot where you can make an impact and kind of go from there.
Shit. In regards to the Eagles and the Cowboys really are two of the best draft and development teams in the NFL. What set the Eagles apart is that they're not really afraid to go outside and sign free agents, like in terms of that might cost more money. The last time the Cowboys signed what I would say top ish market money for a free agent was Brandon Carr back in 2013. And while he was what I would call a reliable starter, he was definitely not worth the money they paid him at the time. Um, but in regards to the Eagles, um, and this is based on your opinion, is the knee is because this has been talked about, is the knee that Jalen Hurts has been dealing with, has it really been affecting him all that much, or is he playing? I know he's playing through it, but like, do you think it's really affected his game as much as like people are talking about, or is that really just more of a talking point?
It definitely has compromised him in the fact that he is not able to be as effective as a runner that we've seen him in
Okay.
recent years. He can still get the short yardage. He can still do enough inside and around the pocket to create throwing lanes for himself. But you can kind of clearly see like on scrambles out of the pocket, he's throwing the ball out, throwing the ball out of bounds more, or he's giving himself up much sooner than he would have in the past. I mean, you even look at some of the early games versus now. I mean, really, since around the Rams game, he has just not looked like the same athlete. Because there were times in that Rams game that he, would escape pressure and run for a first down. But since then, you've seen him be a little bit more calculated in the way and when he runs or when he decides to run, and it's forced him to work much more from the pocket, which he has done a really nice job of doing that lately, and cutting down some of the turnovers that he's struggled with over the first 4 or 5 games. But I don't think it's just a talking point. It's something that he doesn't want to talk about, and every time that they bring it up, he, you know, is on to the next question or doesn't want to really explain it. But the play calling has definitely been lent towards not putting him in situations where he has to make his own read or he has to be on the move outside the pocket. So it's forced him to be a little bit more careful when he does decide to go in those situations. So I do think it's a legitimate talking point in terms of it's affecting his game, but it's making him rely more on his arm, which he's done a really nice job not putting the ball too much in harm's way, but at the same time utilizing his weapons and Goddard, obviously AJ Brown and Devontae Smith.
Sticking kind of into the about Jalen Hurts, have you seen like a big difference from the Shane Steichen offense now to the Brian Johnson offense? Do you What's your thoughts on between the two coaches, the offensive scheme?
I think the difference is the red zone. Between the 20s, the Eagles are the same team. They will RPO you to death. They will run the ball in all types of different ways, whereas outside zone, inside zone, um, power, obviously the tush push, brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it. But once again, the red zone, you can see the difference.
Such a good name.
Yeah, but once you get into red zone, you see the difference between Steichen and their current offense. It just isn't as fluid. It isn't as successful in scoring touchdowns. It takes a little bit more effort for them to move the ball effectively, and the play calling continuity just isn't there. And you think about it, even last year it was helped by the fact that Jalen Hurts was healthy. His running ability in the red zone was a big difference. But now he's a little bit compromised. They're not calling quarterback draws as much as they were and running RPO off of that. So now they have to kind of really rely on their receivers. And AJ Brown has really played at elite level. One of
Mhm.
the best receivers over the last 5 6 weeks in contested catch situations, making yards after the catch and whatnot. So a lot of those plays are going towards him, but I would like to see Dallas Goedert be a little bit more involved in the red zone offense, because he's a big weapon for them down there in the red zone. And then obviously Julio Jones had a touchdown last week in the red zone. So they're starting to figure out a little bit, but they're struggles with Jalen Hurts' legs not being utilized, especially in the red zone, I think are a big reason why you haven't seen them be as explosive offensively and successful in those red zone trips and pulling away from teams.
To stick on to Jalen Hurts just for a moment before we move to the next portion of this is that like one thing that Jalen Hurts is like kind of like coming into is something that Dak had to deal with last year, and that's the interceptions. And I think right now Jalen Hurts is like tied for second, but I've watched a lot of the Eagles snaps, and I can attest to this because I had to go back. I watched all 15 of Dak's interceptions last year, and only 8, potentially 9, were actually on him. About half, maybe 5 of interceptions were actually on Jalen Hurts this year. And I always go back to the Jets game, 3 interception game, as like the proof, the apex point for this. You look at the first interception, he threw it to the tight end. I believe it was Jack Stoll. You can correct me if I'm wrong. He had it in his hands, and then the linebacker made contact, and it popped out. And that was just a great play on defense. So that's not on Hurts. The second one was a poor block on Jermaine Johnson, who gets to the arm in time, knocks it out of his hands, and takes away the trajectory of the ball. And that's again not on Jalen Hurts. That's what you call a pressure interception. The last one though, where he threw in the double coverage and the safety was over the top, that one was on him when he was like trying to force it in there. I believe he was looking for Devontae Smith on that one. That was too much of a force. So I can at least appreciate as a Cowboys fan who had to deal with that last year, and that was never an issue until then. I think Jalen Hurts will be fine, but like the thing is, what he's going through right now is something that every star quarterback has gone to, even Brady, is that when you have like a really really good year where people recognize, okay, he's here to stay. The very next year, teams are like, okay, now we've seen him play. Now we know his tendencies. We know what he likes to do. We know his favorite type of plays. We know his favorite type of routes, and people gain film on you. And the best quarterbacks are able to realize that they've adapted to me, so I have to adapt to them. And that's all Jalen Hurts is going through right now in terms of the struggles that he might see, because you see him still make those plays. And obviously, and he'll make an errant throw once in a while, but overall, it's not all on him. It's just because it's a quarterback position, he's going to get a lot of that hate. And so I need to put that out there before I throw this in there. So I wanted to talk about the offensive line for the Eagles. It's definitely been like the strength of y'all's team. I know right now y'all are dealing with injuries at the right guard. I believe Tyler Steen was taking snaps in practice. I think someone tweeted out there. Cam Jurgens, I guess, hadn't really looked all that good. I think he's probably more of a center anyway. He's going to be the successor to the Kelsey Kingdom, if you want to, for lack of a better term. I believe Sua. I forgot. I can't pronounce his name correctly. I'm sorry. I have a hard time with Polynesian names. Who do you think is going to end up starting this week at right guard? Is it going to be Steen, or is it going to be? I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Look, so hold on, give me a second here. Um, all right, I'm good now. So I think Sua, I think is Opita is how you say it. I
Thank
think
you.
I think he will start this week most likely. I've been hearing rumblings though that Tyler Steen might start. And if so, it might be performance based because Steen got a drive last week during a 2 minute drill, and he looked really good. You know, handling some of the stunts that the Commanders' front seven was running, specifically Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, and that's exactly what you want to see. So I think there's probably a 40% chance that Steen starts. Um, but also I think they're a little bit wary of throwing him in the fire in such a big week and such a big game. But talking to Jason Kelsey after the game last week, you could tell that they're excited about him. He's cross trained at playing both guard and tackle, and he's very talented, very explosive, and he just looks like a better athlete than Sua Elpida, you know, who is just really, really struggled over the last couple weeks. He briefly got hurt in the Commanders game and came back, but he's given up a lot of pressure, especially in that Jets game. He gave up, I believe, 6 or 7 pressures, and uh, a big reason why they couldn't keep, Jalen Hurts clean in that game. And he just hasn't played particularly well over the last couple weeks since stepping in for Cam Jurgens. Jurgens started off the season a little bit slow, but had picked it up before he got hurt. He was eligible to return this week, but clearly he's not ready to play just yet. But for me, I personally would go Steen because I think at the very least you're getting a guy that's going to be a little bit a better run blocker than what they had before. I think you're going to take some lumps in pass protection, but that's why you have Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson to the right and left of him to give him that help. And obviously Johnson as well as Mailata are going to have a big assignment having to contain Micah Parsons, and you just don't want a weak link to attack on along the offensive line. And Opita has been the weak link so far for the Eagles, and I think it would be best to at least give Steen a try, even if it's for a couple possessions, to see what he has, and at least go from there and see what you have, and you can kind of game plan around that. But you can't keep continue having the poor play at right guard. It's just been causing their ineffectiveness in the run game and putting a lot on Jalen Hurts' shoulders.
Absolutely. Sticking on offense, and during the draft, y'all added DeAndre Swift. What is your thoughts on him as an impact on the offense?
He's been a huge impact. They've really utilized him as the top back. Kenny Gainwell has really struggled. Had a fumble last week, I believe, and Um, Swift has been very, very consistent. He does a nice job, like pressing the line of scrimmage and reading the blocks and following Kelsey when he's out pulling out in front of him. He's just very patient and durable. I think that was the biggest thing was, okay, is he going to be able to handle a full load as the RB1? And he has responded really well. Last couple of weeks they just haven't had the lanes to run, but he also adds the ability in as a pass catcher. I think the main thing is for him, he's not much of a pass protector, and that's a big reason why Kenny Gainwell sometimes sees snaps a little bit more snaps, especially in a pass heavy game over Swift. But when Swift is able to get some room and whatnot, he finishes runs very effectively. Runs through the arm tackles, and he's been a very, very excellent addition to the Eagles offense, and really you're seeing what it can be in the run game. Obviously, with Miles Sanders' departure, but for the first time, probably in a couple of years, the Eagles truly have someone that they can go to every down, and they're not constantly subbing or rotating the running backs like they had accustomed to over the last couple of years under Sirianni and Steichen.
Okay, so now I want to shift more in terms of like the strengths and weaknesses of these teams. So the areas of concern that I have offensively and defensively, just for the Cowboys, I'll start with the bad. So the one deficit we have on this team is that ever since Trevon Diggs went down, we moved Deron Bland to the outside, which is fine, but brought Jordan Lewis back in, and since he's come back from the ACL repair a year ago, he's not looking like the same guy. He's very inconsistent. He will make a play, and in the very next play, he'll give up a long catch after the catch. He didn't have the same burst he once did, and that's why I wanted to address a cornerback because it would allow either to Bland to go back into the nickel or have a better option there. So I think whoever plays nickel for y'all, slot receiver for y'all in this game will probably be like the one who gets a lot of the targets. And I know y'all like to use Devontae Smith. I say y'all, obviously you cover the team objectively, but the Eagles like to use Devontae Smith as that Y and Z rotational receiver, and y'all prefer to keep AJ Brown at the X. The only time I ever see him play in the slot, and I've seen it a few times, is during motion, just so he can get matched with a linebacker. But even then, he'll run like a short route, and it's really more of a possession route than anything else, nothing fancy. So I think that's gonna be the big concern for me is on defense is who y'all have in the middle where Jordan Lewis covers. It won't necessarily be tight end because we've actually done a solid job covering tight ends this year, even though obviously Dallas Goedert's one of the better ones in the league. It's going to be that inside receiver. On the offensive side, the concern I have will be at the tackle position. When I've seen both the worst and the best from Tyron Smith at left tackle and Terrence Steele at right tackle this year, when they've been at their best, they've been very good at setting the edges and even run blocks, especially when we have a guard pull to the outside. They love, and you can ask Aaron, they love to do a lot of guard pulls on those outside zones. But I've also seen them give up a lot of pressure to the outside and put Dak in a collapsing pocket within 3 seconds, which is not good because some of these routes take at least 2 seconds to develop. And sometimes they can't even get the running game going because, unfortunately, Tony Pollard, while he's had moments running in between the tackles, he averages, I think, a little over 2 yards more per carry running outside the edge, right, as opposed to inside the A and B gap. So, and for all the faults that the Eagles may have defensively this year compared to last year, they still have a very stout front seven. And so that's going to be the area of concern that I have in this game for the Cowboys. And I know you probably know that's probably what they're going to do.
Yeah. I mean, you look at what, especially last week the Eagles really struggled getting home to the Commanders, but it wasn't because they weren't winning the pass rush, it's just because they were getting the ball out so quickly. So I would imagine that is something that the Cowboys will try to do early in the game. Get the ball out quick, a lot of quick game, test the Eagles secondary in terms of can they tackle well in space? Will they be able to slow down some of the weapons that the Cowboys have? So I expect that to be a big part of the game plan. But when it gets deeper into the game, I could see that becoming an issue, especially if there's like a lot of third and longs, third and tens, third and eights. That's when the Eagles can get really creative in the way that they decide to pass rush. Obviously, bringing in Jalen Carter and him being on in there at the same time as Hassan Reddick and Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat, and really kind of that NASCAR package where you can just twist everybody and just really cause havoc up front. So I think
Is
that
that
is
what they
certainly
call it? They call that the NASCAR package?
I just call it NASCAR because it just your fast some of your fast
Oh, because
pass
the
rushers.
Cowboys literally have a NASCAR package for the defense.
Yeah.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
I
they
think
literally have a front four full of nothing but edge rushers.
yeah. So a lot of teams, kind of have variations of that. I don't know if the Eagles call it that, but they want to put their best athletes out there and cause havoc. Last year was Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Javon Hargrave, and Hassan Reddick. So they're obviously adjusting a little bit. They throw Nolan Smith in there too, quite a bit too, so he can be kind of there instead of Brandon Graham, but um, I will be concerned, especially from the Cowboys' point of view, especially on those third and longs, and giving time for the Eagles' pass rushers to get home. That could be a big concern for Sunday.
So my next question for you is like, what are some key matchups you're looking at? Because one of mine is the Ron Bland versus AJ Brown. Because I know for 6 games, AJ Brown had over 100-yard games, and then looking at Deron Bland, who's had 4 interceptions, and let me make sure, and 3 out of the 4 have been to the house. What is like one of your key matchups in this game?
I think it has to come in the secondary for the Eagles. And I think looking at specifically slot matchups because I know just like how the Eagles move around the receivers, the Cowboys like to do the same thing too with CD Lamb specifically in the slot, and it's been a big area of issue for the Eagles. You know, they've had a number of players like Eli Ricks has played really good in spots for the Eagles secondary and kind of taking over the nickel role, but uh, you got to worry a little bit about him facing off, obviously against CD Lamb. You know, obviously one of the top receivers in the NFL, and as well as Ricks has played, there's just some concern there in giving up big plays. They gave a lot of big plays to the Commanders last week, and you know, it really came out of the bunch sets. So I don't know how often the Cowboys use bunch formations, but it is a big issue for the Eagles covering it because they have Sidney Brown rotating in there at safety and sometimes a big nickel. They have Kevin Byard. Obviously, they traded for a couple weeks ago along with Reed Blankenship. But those bunch sets they really give the Eagles fits, forces them to play a basic zone, and they really got picked apart by Sam Howell. So that would be my biggest thing is how will they address CD Lamb specifically in a secondary? Are they going to have Bradbury or Slay, you know, travel with them, or are they going to just rely on some of their base defense and try their best to either bracket him or funnel him to the safeties and make sure that he doesn't get over the top. So I think that's going to be an interesting chess match and see what Sean Desai does versus the Cowboys. I think that chess match in secondary is really going to be a big factor in this game, and you know could be a deciding factor, especially because I believe the Eagles rank 26 in yards per game allowed passing wise, and a lot of teams have been successful passing on them.
Yeah, and as a Sam Howell truther from that draft, I had him as my second ranked quarterback in that draft behind Malik Willis. And again, like and you know this, the quarterback position is so hard to judge. I like to judge a quarterback based on like in game scenarios where like everything's against them and how they react to it. And often, if you go back to that Wake Forest game, Sam Howell brought them back down 21 points and won that game. And he looked a lot. And I don't know if you, I know you don't like draft comparisons. But I thought he played and a lot like Baker Mayfield, and I was like, he's basically Baker Mayfield. You know, take that with however you want to take that. But going with the Eagles secondary, I know that's been an area of concern for you. That's why I went out and got Kevin Byard. I know everyone talks about that Kevin Byard. He ain't the same guy he was when he was an All-Pro, but if you look at him, he's still a reliable starter up in like that sort of like nickel, that single high / high nickel type safety that a lot of teams like to do now. And he's also been still a willing run defender. But what do you think the big key reason is the secondary's been struggling so far this year?
I think continuity. You know, they just have a lot of different pieces, specifically at the nickel, and they're playing a different defensive system. It's a Vic Fangio style system, with Sean Desai being kind of disciple of that, and it's just completely different from what they were running under Jonathan Gannon. And I think that's kind of the big reason why you don't see Darius Slay as aggressive as he was last year in making plays. They're also not playing zero coverage as much as they were either. Because well, one, they don't have the uh, you know the pieces to do that, and
Can't
two,
afford to.
yeah, the two they can't afford to. You know, and getting Kevin Byard helps a little bit because opposite of Reed Blankenship was just not really a great solution. They had Terrell Edmonds, who they shipped off in the trade for Kevin Byard, and then they had Justin Evans kind of come in at times, and then even Sidney Brown, who was playing a little bit of that too high role, which really is not what he does. He doesn't excel at that. He's more of a guy that's middle of the field, coming downhill more so than
He's a center
in
fielder.
deeper coverage. So I think that was a big reason, continuity, new pieces, new faces, and just playing a different system. But they're starting to figure it out a little bit game by game. It still hasn't looked great stat wise, but I think when they need stops, they are making it. They really clamped down the second half against the Commanders last Sunday, and after Commanders went up 21 or 17-3 Only held them to 14 points. That last touchdown coming in the last few minutes of the game when it was already decided. So uh, they're playing much better in the second half than they are in the first halves, but they got to get off to a better start.
Absolutely. My next question is sticking on defense. So winning the front seven. What is your thoughts on how Jordan Davis has been so far in his second year as a run stopper?
Much better. He's playing much better. He can be on the field a little bit more. They're even using him sometimes on pass rush snaps. But he's played much better. He looks much better and looks more comfortable than he did as a rookie. They're also, he also has a running mate in Jalen Carter there. Fletcher Cox is still hanging around too. But they're doing a much better job rotating those guys and keeping them fresh, and he's just in much better shape than he was last year, and he knows what's expected of him, and he's really handled it well. The Eagles' run defense has still been pretty good, and I think with N'Kobe Dean coming back into the lineup recently over the last 2 weeks has improved the run defense as well. But the front seven has looked great. Specifically, Josh Sweat too, who I mentioned earlier. He's done a nice job setting the edges. And so is Hassan Reddick. Even though he's not having quite the season he did last year, he's still making a big time effort on rundowns, and that's what's causing a lot of third downs to be pushed. And unfortunately, they're not always able to get off the field, but they're doing a nice job defending the run this year.
All right, this is gonna be my last question before Aaron asks his. And Aaron, obviously, you have to ask the question at the end that you ask every guest that you forgot to ask him at the start of the show. But I'm gonna get to this one first, and that is this: Cowboys win because, and Eagles win because.
The Cowboys win because the Eagles struggle converting third downs. I think that either side is going to be a big third down game, but I would say a combination of the Eagles not able to convert third downs, they struggle in the red zone, and then the Cowboys are moving the ball at will. I say the combination of those three things makes it I won't say impossible, but very hard for the Eagles to win if they don't dominate the line of scrimmage, and they can't continue to move the chains on third downs, setting up short fields for their defense. Eagles win because they control the game. One, two, Jalen Hurts is able to make plays outside the pocket, because I think uh, making plays from the pocket is going to be necessary, but I think making those special plays off script is what makes the Eagles offense special. And then three, they cash in on red zone. I think the big two things keys for the Eagles are staying on the field on third downs and turning red zone trips into touchdowns. And if they can't do either, it's going to be a long day for them.
So this is probably it's a light question at the end of the game, the episode off. What is your favorite taco place you ever been to, and why?
Yeah, tell us where it's at too, because
Yeah. Okay.
it's kind of like a free shout, but it is tacos and touchdowns.
Right. Let me think. I would say it's in New Orleans. It's called Barracuda, and they probably have the best tacos I've had ever. um, you there's a they have a mushroom taco that's
Oh, you
amazing.
lost me.
Um, and it was just the first thing I thought of, but they sell really good margaritas and tacos,
And I'm back.
and they have happy hour during the day. If you can barely heat, I would highly recommend Barracuda in New Orleans.
Yeah, I was planning on going there like in
I've been
around
to
February.
NOLA. It ain't hot if it is muggy. If you go like in May or something like that, and and they party. It don't matter what day on a week. If especially if you're on what's it called, the street, the main street,
Bourbon.
Bourbon Street. I went out and met a friend there, and they grew up there, and they took me out to this place in the ward that had like this like down home gumbo. Like they gave it to you in a styrofoam bowl. They give it to you. You know what I'm talking about? A styrofoam bowl type of gumbo, and it was amazing. I love gumbo. I think gumbo. I live in Texas. Like Aaron, I know this. Devin, I'm pretty sure you know this based on my Twitter handle. I live in Texas. We have solid gumbo, but I'm pretty sure it's imported because the stuff y'all got there feels like it's fresh from the ground, fresh from the farm, whatever you want to call it. It had like this like andouille sausage and shrimp and crawfish and all kinds of stuff. I'm like, I don't know, you could put all this stuff in there, and they threw the red beans in there, and that's where you got me because you threw red beans and rice into the gumbo. And I was like, if I live here, I'm gonna double my weight. I already know it. I can't be doing that. I gotta stay healthy. I can't be doing that.
Hey, we're not 30s. We can't be eating heavy like we doing our.
It was so good. Like I didn't see no taco place, but like it was like literally a gumbo stand. It was a gumbo stand. It was amazing. The one time I've been there.
Yeah, so it's definitely been a great show. Definitely appreciate you, Devin, for being on the show. Before we let you go, so we always give the floor to y'all, to the guests, and where they can catch any content you have going on right now. I'm just gonna get the floor to you.
Yeah, so follow me on Twitter at real_D_Jackson. I try to keep up with the latest NFL draft prospects, especially for the 2024 class. So you'll see my video breakdowns and whatnot. And then content wise, I did a couple stories recently. One on the Fanatic Sportsbook inside of FedEx Field at the Commander Stadium, the first inside of NFL Stadium in the NFL. And then a story on some NBA analytics and some different offerings that they're going to have this year in terms of analytics and whatnot. So you can check those out at inquirer.com, and you can find all of my work there.
Sir, this has been Tacos and Touchdowns. Y'all have a good one. Peace.
Peace.